Welcome to Let's Talk Memoir, a podcast for memoir lovers, readers, and writers. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Let's Talk Memoir is also a Substack newsletter. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, answer questions about memoir writing, and share my latest classes and upcoming events. You can go to substack.com and subscribe to Let's Talk Memoir for free. You can also find me, Ronit, on Instagram and on Blue Sky. Today, my guest is Rachel Weaver, whose novel Point of Direction was named a top 10 books to pick up now by Oprah Magazine and won the Willa Cather Award for Fiction. Rachel's newest book, Dizzy, an arresting new memoir, according to Maureen Corrigan on NPR's Fresh Air, published in February of 2026. Her second novel, The Last Run, with Lake Union Publishing, is out now. Prior to earning her MFA in Writing and Poetics at Naropa University, Rachel worked for the Forest Service in Alaska studying bears, raptors, and songbirds. She teaches at Wilkes University and Lighthouse Writers Workshop and holds a CPA in Narrative Medicine from Columbia University. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. So, Rachel, can you share a bit about your new memoir, Dizzy?
Yes, it is a braided narrative that explores my time working in the backcountry of Alaska as a field biologist, working mainly around bears, but lots of other projects as well. And that braids into a narrative of my time as a person with a mysterious illness, getting passed from 30, 40 doctors, 18 years in the medical system. And it's mostly about power dynamics in both settings.
Yes. And I would love to talk about the structure that you arrived at for this memoir. When did you feel you had found one that worked or that you needed to tell this story? Can you talk about that excavation and discovery?
Yeah, the first thing I did was write the illness part, and it was so repetitive. I think this happens in memoir a lot, where the same thing happens over and over and over, and it's more a story of how you change, how the individual changes in the face of something that is consistent and repetitive. So in the process of trying to get rid of as much repetitiveness as I could, it became pretty short. Also, I was making the reader feel the same feeling over and over and over. And so I needed something to disrupt that and honestly to start to heal from putting myself back in that hardship, those really hard years of being ill and not having a diagnosis. I started writing just some funny stories that I remembered from my time in Alaska. Lots of ridiculous things happened, mostly to cheer myself up, give myself another writing project that wasn't so sad, and remember that my life wasn't all illness. And in starting to write those stories from Alaska and thinking about the illness narrative, that's when I started to recognize the similar thematic element in both of power dynamics and how they play out in both those settings. And then I started trying to weave them together, and it became more of a puzzle that was fun to work on.
Yeah, well, you said that you felt it was getting repetitive and there wasn't as much material, and you maybe didn't want to continue just unbrokenly to put the reader in the same position over and over again, emotionally or physically.
Mm-hmm.
Did you arrive on that understanding on your own? Did you have trusted readers who said, okay, I feel like you need to break this up? Did you have to put it away for a while and come back? How did you get there to this understanding?
I have this process that I use. I developed it actually for myself, and then I started using it with my graduate students that I teach and my 2-year students that I teach at Lighthouse. And it's this series of questions that a writer can ask themselves, either fiction or memoir. And one of the questions is, what does the reader feel in this scene, right? So then it lists out in the way that I like to do it in a spreadsheet. So each scene has a column for how is the reader feeling? And it's just a way to map the emotional roller coaster that you're sending your reader on, and to make sure that it's varied, right? You want your reader to feel something different even if it's mostly a story about feeling anxious or feeling trapped or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
if you give your reader a little break and then throw them back into that feeling, it's even more intense, right? So it's a way to raise tension and also just not to wear your reader out. So it's a way to sort of evaluate your book according to how the reader might be experiencing it.
Okay, so you did that, and then I suppose when you saw the takeaway emotions on your spreadsheet, you thought, "Oh, wait, that's a lot of this. So how
Yes,
can I disrupt that?"
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you've published 2 novels. Congratulations, especially on the most recent one.
Thank you.
Can you reflect on some of the ways that maybe the writing process felt different, or maybe it doesn't feel different to you? I just would love to know what writing fiction and writing nonfiction/memoir is like for you, and if they are very different or not.
Yeah, I think they're very different. I mean, obviously, when you're writing about yourself, there's a lot of processing that's going on in those early drafts, especially. For me, at least, there was a lot of just asking myself, why did I react that way? What is it about me? What is it about my past? What is it about any of these specific things that happened to me or situations I put myself in that sort of crystallized into how I was dealing with the illness in the present part of the story. And that was hard. I felt like I would write for a while and then I would have to recover. I would have to sort of heal. And then I could go back into it, sometimes for long periods of time. I don't feel that way with fiction. Because you can make anything up, it's kind of easier to solve the problems, right? In memoir, I knew what story elements I needed and I could see that they weren't in there yet. And so it became a process of distillation. All these things that happened, I had to distill out the specific things that lined up like a story, since life often doesn't.
Yeah. I would love to know a little bit about your publishing journey and how that came to pass that you found that Dizzy landed in the hands of your publisher and what feedback, if any, the editor or the press gave you, or if they felt that the book was ready to go. I'm curious about that type of journey you had there.
Yeah, the book, I can't remember exactly how long my agent was shopping it around. It ended up at several editorial boards at different publishers. The problem was always the marketer in each of those situations at other presses. When I was shopping the book around, it didn't have an ending, really. I had not found
Ah,
the
yeah.
thing that helped me. So it wasn't a restitution narrative. And that actually was one of the issues that was brought up in some of those editorial boards, because it was more a book about living with long term illness. How do you live sort of around it, incorporating it, accommodating it,
Yeah.
and still doing what you want to do in some way or another, sort of. But then it becomes sort of a different book when the end is added. So I learned about this series that the book is the first book of. The series is called Connective Tissue. It's out of West Virginia University Press. It's a graduate of the Columbia Narrative Medicine program who's the series editor, and she is looking to put together a bookshelf for anyone teaching health humanities, medical humanities, anything that is related to the patient experience or clinical communication. And once she and her board picked up the book, there wasn't much that they wanted revised, except there was a little bit of work left to do to make those two threads make more sense together. So I'm glad that I went through it one last time. I think I clarified how those threads were working together a bit more in that final draft.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's always very interesting to see how people get their books into the world. And you lived with this illness for so long, and you're going to read an excerpt in a moment. I wonder if you could quantify how long from maybe first drafting the book to having it accepted and in the final stages of publication, of getting it out into the world, do you think it took?
I think I worked on it for about 5 years, but I took a number of breaks. I mean, I would take a year off just to sort of process and heal here and there. So I did that a couple times. And then, so that was about 5 years. And then I think my agent shopped it around for a year and a half, maybe, or a year. I can't remember exactly. And then, of course, once it gets picked up by the publisher, then it takes a while again. So maybe another year on top of that.
Yeah, and actually, I'm wondering, once this press, you said West Virginia, right? That
Mhm.
press, once they picked it up, did you already have the coda in place, the last chapter, or was that not happening yet?
Well, that had happened. So that happened. I found the person who was able to figure out more specifically what was happening for me and to really alleviate most of my symptoms in the time between when they bought it and when it was time for me to start working on it again in that final draft. And so then we had a lot of conversations about should it be included? How do I include it? How do we add it on without it feeling too tacked on? So that was a lot of back and forth until we landed
Yeah, I
on.
mean, that was such an unusual situation, but also so wonderful. We have so much to talk about because I want you to read this excerpt, but I have so many questions about writing in this style, and we'll get there in a second. But first, I would absolutely love for you to begin with that first excerpt we talked about. And this is pretty much, isn't it, page one, page two of your book?
Yep, chapter one. On the day that would become the line between before and after, I opened my eyes to the walls of the bedroom folding and sliding and picking up speed. In the dim blue-gray light of morning, the room gathered itself into a proper hurricane. I squeezed my eyes shut. I'd felt fine when I'd gone to bed the previous night. I had not been drinking. Nothing like this had ever happened before. With my eyes closed, I was flung weightless and spinning through dark space. I opened my eyes wide and pressed my body hard against the mattress in search of the center, the still place, any place. My hands frantic for something firm to hold on to, but everything was moving with me. Carl, my boyfriend, still asleep next to me on the bed that had been picked up by the angry arms of the hurricane, rolled just out of reach when I grasped for him. Desperate to get away from whatever was happening, I pushed the covers off inch by inch, keeping my head as still as possible, and slid down to all fours next to the bed. I set my sights on the hallway. I was clawing more than crawling, the carpet rushing beneath my hands like a river just let loose from a dam. In the hallway, panting, I slowly got my feet under me, crouched low, hands spidered against the carpet. I pressed my shoulder up against the wall so I knew where it was and slowly stood. I made it to the bathroom by slithering along the wall. If I could just brush my teeth, maybe have some coffee, I figured things would right themselves. I stood in the bathroom, took 4 slow, deep breaths, forcing the rest of the sleep from my head, and the spinning slowed. I bent slowly and splashed water onto my face, wiped it mostly dry with a hand, and peered at myself in the mirror. Maybe this was a panic attack. 7 days earlier, I had packed up a life I loved in Alaska to start a 2-year creative writing graduate program in Colorado. Carl had come along to help with the move. That particular morning, he would begin the 2,500-mile trek back home without me. Somewhere in the swirling distance, I heard his alarm go off. We were staying with a friend of mine I'd met on a boat years before. I'd be there until I moved into the house of a single mom I didn't know and her 4 kids. I had just paid off my undergraduate loans and was determined to squeak by somehow without borrowing money for graduate school. The single mom needed someone to make dinners 4 nights a week and had an empty basement she was willing to offer up as a trade. I didn't know how to cook or what kids ate, but I was going to figure it out in order to live in a basement for free. I also needed a full-time job or two that I could work around a full class schedule. The ill-fated plan was to finish school and get back to the perfect little A-frame cabin on the water, tucked between hemlock and spruce, always fogged in just enough to remind you winter was coming. In the brightly colored, cheery bathroom, I took a deep breath. Breathing helped with panic attacks, I'd heard. The hurricane had subsided, but the bathroom sloshed and rolled as if I were out in the Bering Sea clinging to a life raft. The walls shimmied in my vision like thin curtains in a breeze. I rubbed my eyes, splayed my hands out on the counter, and told myself it was solid and still. I just had to wait it out. I was good at waiting things out.
Thank you so much. I really wanted you to read the beginning because when I opened your book and started, I was absolutely captivated and also really physically aware of how you were feeling. Obviously, I didn't have those experiences myself, but I felt really visceral. And you take such care to put the reader in your situation physically and emotionally. And I would love to talk about how you captured what you experienced in such an embodied way.
I set out to do that. I wanted to write a book that really put words to the experience of being inside a body that is not working the way it should or always had before that point. I wanted to capture the specificity of my own experience, but capture the feeling that so many people go through as they navigate illness of any sort. And I really wanted it to be a resource, both for people who are experiencing chronic illness so that they feel seen and heard. And I also wanted it to be a resource in that it could be something that those folks could hand to the people that care for them, live with them, worry about them, to understand their experience much more. So I set out with that intent very specifically from the beginning. So to do that, it was brutal though, because to do that, I had to put myself back in it fully.
I mean, that's what I was thinking, Rachel. When I read it, I was like, first of all, I think I'm getting dizzy. And
Yeah.
second of all, how did you live through this and then have to write all these different scenes where different variations of this feeling and what you were going through was happening in your body and have to put it on the page? I don't know how you did it.
It was so hard. At first, I was trying to do it in the midst of my life. I have 2 kids, and I would be sitting in here in my office trying to get myself back to that terrible point, but I would have to feel it all so viscerally myself again that it was hard to pull out of when suddenly it's time to go pick them up from 4th grade, or whatever. And all the other moms that are standing there waiting for their kids are like, how's your day? I would just have lived the worst day of my life again, an hour, 20 minutes prior. So I applied to writing residencies. I was offered one in Wyoming, and I decided that I would do it. I would dive back in and get it all on the page in that very raw, visceral first draft all at once, separate from my life, separate from parenting, having to cook, having to interact. So I was the weird girl in the corner who was sad the whole time.
How long was the residency?
I did it in 7 days.
Get out of town. Wait a minute. You did the bulk of the writing of your physical experience in 7 days?
Yeah, but that's only half the book. So I think it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like 35,000 words or something, but I wrote for 12 hours a day and I just stayed in it and kept myself there so that I could capture it without having to get myself back into that super hard space across time. But it was brutal. And after that, I didn't look at it for probably 8 or 9 months.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because then you had to edit, right? And then you had to kind of be back there again in a different way. Did you feel sick after you wrote like that about the experience?
Well, I was still dizzy when I was writing
Right.
it. So I still felt it, but I was in a little bit better place about it because I had gotten a diagnosis by the time I started writing the book. And I was working with a doctor who really did care very much about what was happening and was helping me in a really significant way, both with the illness, but also just with me trying to sort through how I felt about the illness. So I was in a little better space, but I still was feeling it every day. So I don't know that I would have written it if I hadn't started it before I got better.
Yeah, that just made me wonder that, right? You were already still negotiating a lot of the symptoms, but it was better. It wasn't like black and white. You could kind of maybe dip your toes in, immerse yourself in it, even though it wasn't the most wonderful experience, and then get back to life. But if you already felt so much better. So nowadays, when you go to readings, or like just now you read for me, is it difficult at all to take care of yourself when you're doing promotion for a book like this?
It's not too bad in short bits. I feel sad for that younger me. There's so much ahead for that younger version of me. But I suppose there always is. We just don't know what's coming. But I did pass on reading it for the audio version for this exact reason. I didn't
Ah.
want to go back all the way through it, but it's okay in short bits.
Yeah. Then there I went and I sent you that first excerpt, which I'm sure you
It's
were
okay.
like, oh, Well, here's the other thing. When you teach, we were just talking about this in one of my writing groups about specificity and particularity and detail. And it would be so easy to just say, I felt sick or I felt dizzy. And of course, you're writing a book about this, so you wouldn't do that. But this just drives home how powerful and compelling visceral details are, the sensory details, how important it is for us to try to capture what it is we're experiencing on a granular level so that the reader can feel that they're there with us.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to build empathy and understanding is to really work hard at the sentence and word level to pull your reader fully inside that experience that they haven't had. When you make those sort of overarching generalization, summarizing kind of statements like, I felt terrible, I felt sick, I felt dizzy, it gives the reader a cognitive understanding of it, which is a whole different thing than a visceral understanding of it.
Yes, and I do think you're right that then we build more empathy with our readers. We put ourselves in their shoes and vice versa. And it gets into that universality. Well, you went to dozens of doctors. I put 33, but I think maybe it was 40. Did you say? You don't
I
know? You
I don't
lost track.
know. I've
You had a
counted so many
spreadsheet for that
times.
too.
I had a spreadsheet, but I used to like adjust this. Like I wouldn't put all of the Eastern medicine folks on the Western medicine doctor's spreadsheet. And I don't know. I was always kind of messing with it to try to simplify it. And I don't really know. I've counted a number of times, but it's definitely in the 30s. It's most likely in the 40s, and it's probably in the 50s. I don't know. Lots.
All the modalities. You had muscle testing and chiropractors, and you had acupuncture, and then people making herbal packets for you. And many of the doctors would say to you, oh, it's probably stress, or a couple of other diagnoses came up too. And you talk about this in the memoir, but I wonder, how do you think you got yourself to go to all these appointments, to keep writing and working and raising a family? I mean, you had twins in the midst of your crippling condition.
Yeah, I don't know. This is the question that everyone asks me, and I really don't know the answer. I mean, I think I've always been a pretty determined person, but I was so worn out by the process. It would take me so long to gather enough courage to try again, to put myself through that process of hoping maybe this will work. Maybe this person will have some answers. Maybe they'll have some idea about how to lessen these symptoms. And then those hopes being dashed again was so hard to prepare for and be ready for. And it was harder each time. I just never really thought of myself as a sick person, which is weird because I was very sick every day, all day long for 18 years. I just always thought of myself as a healthy person who had something happening that it always seemed like there was more to it than what anyone was saying.
Didn't make sense, right?
No, it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't. And it didn't line up. Like what I was hearing people tell me was going on with me, it didn't feel like what was going on with me. Like it always felt like we were just barely getting at the symptoms, but never at the underlying issue. I mean, I doubted myself probably every other day, but I did trust myself every other day as well. So it just felt very unsettled. And it felt like there must be somebody out there that is looking at this in a different way, has a different idea, is thinking more widely. And I did find that person just really, really randomly in a Google search.
Yeah, after all that. And I have this other excerpt I pulled, but I want to ask you if it's okay for you to read it or if you'd like to skip it.
I can read it.
Yeah, it's on page 200, but again, I honor the fact that it might be difficult for you and if you don't have to.
No, that's okay. I can read it.
Okay.
That night, alone in the house because Mike was at the firehouse, the Vanderbilt doctor's words rang in my head. I went outside to get away from them, but they remained loud and pounding as I walked the sidewalks of the neighborhood. Life on Verapamil was better, but only in the way running out of food was better than running out of water. I lay down thinking I'd fall asleep and that his words and that look on his face would go away. But instead, my chest tightened into a fist. I swallowed small sips of air and the fist clamped down harder. Panic colored everything a deep purple in the way bears or weightless drops in planes never had. I rolled down to the floor next to the bed, air locked high up in my chest. On all fours, gasping like a fish on the bank, I knew for sure that if this was as good as it was ever going to be, then I was not going to last long. Slowly, the panic eased and the sips of air became gulps. Mike's old yellow dog, Griffey, curled up next to me on the floor, and we slept. The next morning, Griffey and I sat on the back deck. If this is the best it's going to be, can I be okay with that? I asked myself. The small hard pit of panic in my chest pulsed when I thought about it. Who wants to just survive minute after minute? Not me. Fishing or living in Maine or doing whatever my dead dad was doing while telling us he wasn't dead sounded much better. I shook my head to clear it. Who's to say I wouldn't be dizzy or otherwise mangled in that other life too? And besides, Mike wouldn't be over there. And besides that, why do I trust the word of some guy who would undoubtedly get us killed in the backcountry if he was in charge out there? Because we are taught to trust doctors, that's why. We are taught they know more than us, but what does he know if he doesn't ask? What hidden pieces of the puzzle could he have possibly discovered in 7 minutes of him talking at me? All right, I whispered, the word puffing out into a cloud in the cold morning air. You can control how long you spend feeling sorry for yourself. All right, I said again, gathering up all the trust I had left in the world and placing it at the very center of myself. I would not accept that this was as good as it could get. I would keep searching for someone to help. I would do more than just survive. I would keep my head down, dig deep, and find a way to live anyway.
Thank you so much. I have this quote from your last chapter, quote, "This was supposed to be a book about the kingdom of the sick, but it recently made the turn to restitution narrative." And I wanted to include this because I was curious how far into the writing and publishing process this happened and you made the decision. And I have that answer now. But I also wanted to point out how fluid our manuscripts can be because I too, I didn't have the same situation as you, but I also, toward the very end of my run up to publishing, something happened in my life and I added it as an epilogue into my book. And I hadn't counted on it. My book was going to try to stand alone without it. But then it was such an important point that I added it. So, how do you feel about the fact that you did include it?
As writers, we're always looking for that ending that resonates with the beginning as far as crafting goes. But at the same time, we're still living our lives throughout the whole process. And there's even been some things that have happened just this year alone since the book came out that have helped me understand my own journey better in a way that I didn't yet understand it when I was writing this book. I was getting there, but I think there's no real way to manage that. You know, it's like a snapshot. It's like a picture of you in 8th grade where like, no, you're never going to wear your bangs like that again, but you can appreciate that that 8th grade you was looking good, right? So I think it's that way with any book we write, but especially memoir, because you have to call it an ending. You have to name an ending at some point, but of course it's not the ending. Everything is still happening. Things are still moving forward. So the decision to put the ending in there, I think it was a little bit of a hard thing to do because to me, the book felt like the end that it had previous to this was an ending that resonated well with the beginning, but it wasn't representative of the whole journey. And I felt like it was more important to get the full representation of the journey in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I am curious. You said that you've come to understand some things. Do you mean behavior wise about yourself, or was it about your physical body or about your dynamic?
All of that. I mean, I think the longer I feel better, I had such terrible brain fog for all those
Mm.
years that it was very overwhelming when it all cleared out at once after 18 years of really struggling to think in a linear fashion and process things. The first couple years were very overwhelming. And now it's been 3 years since I have been better. And I think I've just have been able to process things a little more thoroughly. And then just more things about my family of origin and then talking about it. Like I've never talked about myself so much as I have in the last 6 or 8 months, right? People ask me these questions like,
Well, right, because you wrote fiction before, right? And so they would
yes,
talk about the book.
Yes, but I think it's good. I mean, I think it has led to a lot of interesting conversations. I take the dogs on a walk every day and I never listen to anything. I just walk and let my brain do whatever it's going to do. And a lot of that is sort of processing the conversations that I've ended up in since the book came out with other people struggling with chronic illness or other people writing memoir, doctors or clinicians. It's just been a lot of thinking about my journey, my writing, what it is to be a sick person in the world for so long.
Yeah, and I guess it seems kind of simple to say this, but yes, we're works in progress and we keep on changing and evolving. And my relationship with the people I wrote about in my memoir changes, sometimes for the better, sometimes they become more complicated. And I will sometimes ask myself, wait, did I write the truth? And I think I
Yeah.
wrote the best truth that I understood at the time,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, that's the thing that's so confusing about memoir, I think, because after you capture it, then you can see it clearly from that way, but you can also see it from how it is from this perspective, right? 2 years
Yeah.
later, 3 years later. You just said it really well. Like there's that truth as I understood it at that point, but there's also maybe a little more nuance to it now, maybe. I don't know. It's really weird.
Yeah, and it also reminds me too that I'm really happy that I did some work emotionally, psychologically in therapy and on my own and in my relationships prior to finalizing the book and in my later revisions because I could see how had I not done some of that interrogation, that self-interrogation, I could have had a more vindictive memoir or a memoir that I might regret now. I still think I did the best I could at the time and I don't know, I'd have to read it again to feel sort of even-handed with people. I mean, it's in the world, even if just a couple of people read it or hundreds or thousands of people read it, we want to be able to feel satisfied with the way we depicted things. So yeah, I can imagine with brain fog for 3 years. Also, I really need to just point out that you wrote 2 books or 2 and a half books during your illness. I mean, that's the answer. That's how you persevered and finished it up and did all the things. It's hard enough to write, let alone have chronic dizzy and autoimmune disease. It's amazing to me what you accomplished.
Thanks. Writing has always been a thing that has helped me process and helped me understand the world. So even though it was hard, it still has always been a bit of a refuge, even when I was so sick and I had to modify the way that I was working and writing without the use of a computer and screens and all of the things that were very impossible for me in those really dizzy years.
Mhm. Well, what advice would you like to share with writers working on their memoirs?
I think I would say allow yourself to write everything in the exact way it's coming out in those early drafts. You probably do have a more vindictive, angry version of the book than you might want in the world, or a book that's full of one type of feeling as opposed to many different types of feelings. And that is totally fine. That first draft is really you telling yourself the story. And so, however it comes out, just don't judge it and realize that when you go back to it, you can layer in and your brain will layer in those other emotions that are also at play in the story. But just trust that however it's coming out, it will end up something much more complicated and layered by the end of the process.
Thank you. And what are a few books you'd like to recommend that informed your writing process? Or you're a teacher too, so that you feel that memoirists really need to get their hands on?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's just important to read as many memoirs as you can find. One of the best things I ever did for myself was early on when I was trying to figure out craft and trying to make some decisions about crafting elements in my first draft of my first novel, which applies to memoir writing as well, is I read through the alphabet in the library. So I was living in a rural part of Alaska, and the A section in the library was like this big. So I picked one book, a book I'd never heard of, and I read, an A book and then a B book and a C book, and I went all the way through. So stick with memoir and read a whole bunch of books that you just randomly pick at the library, because you'll read a lot that you don't like. And I think you can learn so much about how people put books together, how they craft them in ways that are pleasing to you as a reader and not pleasing to you as a reader. And that can really help set some boundaries for how you make those same choices in your own book. So I would say just read a lot of books, especially ones that aren't recommended to you, but that you just randomly find.
Okay, that's great. Are there memoirs that you love, or do you not want to pick favorites?
Oh, I mean, I read so many. I mean, I think maybe my favorite, the one that like landed super in a very resonating way with me is probably Tony Bernhardt's How to Be Sick. But yeah, I mean, I have a whole huge shelf back here. There's so many, but I would say hers, that one was really interesting to me because it wasn't a restitution narrative. It's not about how to get
Yeah.
better. It's about how to be sick, which was very important to me in my own journey, both as a person and as a writer.
Yeah, I think that is so important. It's really important to keep in mind that there are some autoimmune diseases, some illnesses, some situations do not resolve. And what happened to you is remarkable in so many ways. Where can people connect with you, find out more about you and your work, and get a copy of Dizzy?
You can find Dizzy anywhere that books are sold. You can request it from a local bookstore. You can find it on Amazon. My website is rachelweaver.net. And you can also find me on Instagram at rachelweaver2222.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being willing to read from your book and for having this conversation with me. I'm so happy that you're feeling better, and I'm so happy we had this time together. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Memoir. For more about my story and the project that started me on my memoir-loving path, you can check out my memoir, When She Comes Back, which is available wherever books are sold and as an audiobook that I narrated. For more about this episode and my guest, please visit the links in the show notes. You can also find a complete catalog of Let's Talk Memoir episodes at ronitplank.com/Let's Talk Memoir. Let's Talk Memoir is also on Substack. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, additional interviews, and upcoming classes that I'm offering. There's no paywall. If you are a fan of Let's Talk Memoir, please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you feel moved to leave a podcast rating and review, I appreciate it very much. That helps more writers and readers find the show. Thank you so much for being here.